मा 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 माँ तुम खड़ी हृदय में आज माँ माँ तुम खड़ी हृदय में आज तुम संग सफल हो सकल काज मेरो तुम संग सफल हो सकल काज माँ तुम खड़ी हृदय में आज माँ तुम खड़ी हृदय में आज श्वास निर्भय निर्भय मन अब तब यंत्र सफल बन करूं तव काज श्वास निर्भय निर्भय मन अब तब यंत्र सफल बन करूं तव काज ना कोई त्रुटि हो ना निर्भय ना कोई भेद ना कोई त्रुटि हो ना कोई भेद निर्भय प्राण सजे इंद्रिया साज निर्भय प्राण सजे इंद्रिया साज माँ तुम खड़ी हृदय में आज माँ तुम खड़ी हृदय में आज महाचेतना दिव्य प्रकाश में महातीरथ हो काज महाचेतना दिव्य प्रकाश में महातीरथ हो काज हृदय ही हो मंदिर कर्म ही पूजा हृदय ही हो मंदिर कर्म ही पूजा तुम्हें समर्पित माँ जन मन जन हित सचित प्रकाशित जन मन जन हित सचित प्रकाशित धन्य है पूर्ण रूपांतर आज धन्य है पूर्ण रूपांतर आज माँ तुम खड़ी हृदय में आज तुम संग सफल हो सकल काज मेरो तुम संग सफल हो सकल काज माँ तुम खड़ी हृदय में आज माँ तुम खड़ी हृदय में आज
Namaste, my dear brothers and sisters. The love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch. You just heard an invocation of the Divine Mother. The devotee is in an ecstatic mood because now the devotee is convinced that the Mother has occupied a place in her heart. And once that is there, then what is there to fear? What is there to think about? Because then it is all in the hands of the Divine, the who knows all and can do all. And therefore now she has no sense of fear and she's in an ecstatic mood. So that is what this beautiful devotional song in Mithu's voice was about. Today's session is on eating wisely. Life is more to be lived than understood. Understanding might facilitate living what we have understood, but it is seldom sufficient. Understanding may be necessary, at least for some of those who have an intellectual approach to life, but it is not sufficient. It at the best a facilitator, because once we have understood something, then in addition it requires a great deal of sincerity, courage, willpower, perseverance to put it into practice. And when it comes to nutrition, that applies, of course, to what we eat and how much we eat, but it applies even more to how we eat. And that is what we shall be concentrating on today. And that is, again, extremely important because that is what puts food and the act of eating, which we do a few times every day, in the spiritual context. So with that, we go to the slides. So the topic is eating wisely. My humble obeisance to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo. Glory to the Master and the Divine Mother. The YES program is a part of the 150th birth anniversary celebrations of Sri Aurobindo and the 75th anniversary of India's independence. So for food, there are three important aspects: what to eat, how much to eat, and how to eat. So far, we have concentrated on what to eat and how much to eat, but even that has angles which are relevant to today's topic. So we shall start with what to eat. The first thing is how much of a role should taste play in the selection of our food? Health should always have a priority above taste. And of course, that doesn't mean that we have to ignore taste altogether or to make a deliberate effort to eat something which doesn't taste good. What is important is that we do not develop a sense of attachment to the taste. We do not become dependent on taste for our happiness. So one can certainly enjoy when we get something which is good to taste. Not to acknowledge it, not to enjoy it, would be something which will not be sincere, which will not be truthful, because the fact is that we do like something which we like to eat something which tastes good, and all the things do not taste equally good. Another important thing is that if a food tastes good, it should not lead to greed, which means we should not have too much of it just because it is tasting good. And if we have succeeded in overcoming the attachment to the taste, then we will not long for food that tastes good. We'll not have a craving for it. While we are having it, we'll enjoy it. But when it is not there, we'll not miss it. Or we'll not keep thinking, when will I get it next? Have higher goals Now, this is important because if we have to overcome an attachment to something, that attachment has to be replaced by something higher than that. So it is not enough to realize that the taste is only one of those fleeting, fragile, and flimsy pleasures, as all sensory pleasures are. That is not sufficient. What is also important is that instead of that, what is it that we should get attached to? What is that higher goal that we have in life? And that is how spirituality facilitates overcoming our attachment to sensory pleasures, because we do have a higher goal, a goal that is long lasting, in fact, everlasting. And it is only something that is everlasting that can be a source of everlasting joy. And how to achieve that? There are two types of approaches to this. One is that we use brute force of willpower to suppress our attachment to what say tastes good in this case. That really just generally does not work, because that only pushes it under the carpet. The desire remains, it keeps lurking, and in fact, avoidance might exaggerate the desire and the attachment, so that at the first opportunity, it returns with a vengeance. So suppression is something which is both painful as well as not really effective enough. In contrast, what is mastery? Mastery is something which is based on this understanding that this food that tastes good, it is only a fleeting pleasure. It will not give me lasting happiness. So I can enjoy it while it is there, but I should look for something more long lasting, something more steady for my happiness. I should not be dependent on this. So that's where we can master the desire, and that is what is what may be called an inside out approach. That is, there's a change going on within. One has not tried to achieve a change overnight that from tomorrow I'll not take anything that tastes good. There's a change going on within that, yes, this is not a source of lasting happiness. I have a higher goal which can fulfill that need for something to which I can get anchored, which has no desires, no anger, no jealousy, no greed. And what is that? That is my divine essence. I got anchored to that. The mind is anchored to that. And therefore, now the mind does not crave. Now, once that the change has started taking place inside, it starts getting reflected in our outer life, which means that we may still continue to enjoy the food, but then we get less and less dependent on it. We stop longing for it. When we are having something nice to eat, we don't start thinking, when will I get it the next time? That insecurity does not plague us, and therefore, actually, we can enjoy it while having it much better. That's what Isha Upanishad means when it says, Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha. Give them up, renounce them, and enjoy them. How can one both renounce and enjoy? One can enjoy if one has renounced inside. That is, inside we have started overcoming our attachment, and we have given up that food within, while outwardly we may be still taking it. But at the same time, as this inner renunciation proceeds and starts reflecting in outer life, outer renunciation may not be essential for that, but it starts happening. So outer renunciation does come, but that is because of this inner change. On the outside, the pleasures that we normally are craving for, they start falling out of our life, they start dropping out. So while the important thing is inner renunciation, not outer renunciation, but as inner renunciation proceeds, outer renunciation becomes an automatic process. And that is how we are no longer dependent on a sensory pleasure for one's happiness. And that is, in fact, true freedom or true liberation. We have been liberated from our bondage, the bondage to, in this case, food that tastes good. In fact, when a person says that I'm free to eat whatever I want, that is not true freedom, because then the person is trying to choose something which the person likes, and this he calls freedom. But in fact, that is not freedom, because the person's happiness depends upon this uh, freedom to make a choice of what the person wants to eat. And if he continues to choose what he likes to eat, what tastes good, then the person is actually becoming dependent on that for his happiness. True happiness is something different. It is not really freedom, but it's more of a liberation from the bondage, so that now the person will be liberated from this dependence, and now the person does not care for it anymore. While it is there, he enjoys it. When it is not there, he does not miss it. That's what Sri Aurobindo meant when he said, if I get it, I take. If I don't get, I shall not mind. Now, how do we develop this mental idea that there are certain things that taste good? Actually, conditioning begins in childhood. Suppose a child is being fussy about eating. What do their parents do? The parents start offering certain items like, say, chocolate, ice cream, or a snack, and tell the child, okay, if you don't want to eat normal food, have this. So the child associates certain types of foods with better taste, and this then continues into adulthood. So the child has got conditioned to associate certain types of foods with good taste. And history repeats itself. When this person becomes a parent, does the same thing with his or her child. Not only that, parents refuse to see that the child has grown up. So if the child has grown up, they continue to offer the same food to the child. So the parents assume that what the child liked at the age of 5, the child will also like at the age of 50. So when the child visits the parents, they try to make sure they have the same things ready, which the child liked at the age of 5. And the child may actually do it because the child got conditioned to it. And because of this conditioning, even if the child is no longer attached to this type of food, the child has changed his or her tastes. The child has started preferring health over taste. Of course, the two don't always have to be in conflict, but his priorities have changed. Now he prefers food which is healthy, even if it is not very palatable. But then, because of this conditioning, for this person, it becomes more or less a duty to appreciate certain foods. Person thinks that, well, these are foods that are supposed to be good, they're supposed to taste good, and therefore, if I've been provided those, I should appreciate them. So this is how conditioning works. But looking at it logically, there's nothing really absolute about what tastes good. We first learn to like certain foods. We are conditioned to liking them because we are told that these are the foods which taste good. And then we continue liking them throughout life without sometimes giving it a thought. When Mahatma Gandhi was a young boy and he went to England to study law, he promised his parents that I will not have meat there. And therefore, he stuck to vegetarian food. But in those days, vegetarian food in that country was not very common. And therefore, sometimes he had to just and he didn't know cooking. So all he had to do was to get hold of some vegetables, etc., and boil them and eat them. And he found that with that determination, that resolve that he will not have non-vegetarian food, he found that even boiled spinach started tasting very good. And then he came to the conclusion that the true sight of taste is not the tongue, but the mind. And in fact, logically, there's no absolute reason why the sweetness of carrots or grapes is not as good as that of a rasgulla or ice cream. Both are sweet, and it's just our conditioning that we find rasgulla or ice cream tastier than carrots or grapes. There are people who give up sugar because they have diabetes, although just giving up sugar is not sufficient. There's a lot more that is needed in the diet that they should do if a person has diabetes. But suppose a person has given up sugar because the person has diabetes. Initially, the person does not like that tea, but then the person gets accustomed to that tea. And the person gets accustomed to it such an extent that if then somebody provides him tea to which sugar has been added, the person finds that now the tea is not tasting as good. So the person starts liking tea without sugar better than the tea which has sugar. So that's how the taste changes. When Sri Aurobindo had just gone to Pondicherry, he had gone with one of his friends who were with him in the freedom struggle. Another one had preceded him, and a few more followed, so that for a long time he was with these 5 young boys, all younger than him, who were with him in the freedom struggle. And these young boys were very fond of sports, and in the evening they went to play. Sri Aurobindo was not interested in games and sports, so he would stay home for his scholarly and spiritual pursuits. So what these young people did was to cook some food, because Sri Aurobindo wanted to have an early dinner and then go to play in the evening. And Sri Aurobindo would finish with the dinner before they returned from sports, and then these boys will come and have the dinner which they had cooked before leaving for the games. One day it so happened that when they started having their dinner, they found that they had forgotten to add salt to the vegetable. And that was the only vegetable that had been cooked. So the next day they asked Sri Aurobindo, how was the food yesterday, the evening meal? He said it was fine. So then they told him, but we had forgotten to add salt to the vegetable. And what did he say? He said, just as salt has a taste, saltlessness also has a taste. Why is Prasad distributed in a Gurudwara sacred? It is sacred because of the feelings with which it has been made. And there's another physical explanation which some people have offered, that it has 3 components. It has ground wheat flour, it has ghee, clarified butter, and it has sugar. And all these 3 have gone through enough processing for their identity to be completely dissolved. The identity has merged in that prasad. Wheat which grew as a grain has been crushed. Sugar which grew as sugar cane has been processed to give us sugar. And ghee, which initially was milk, has gone sufficient processing to become clarified butter or ghee. And the result is that the original identity or the ego identity of these has been crushed, and the 3 have merged into a single entity. So this unification of the 3, the ego of which has been dissolved, is what makes this prasad sacred. So having seen some of the spiritual aspects of what to eat, let's turn to how much to eat. Because if we eat too much of even a food that is otherwise healthy and desirable, it acquires a tamasic character. So how much to eat is equally important. Of course, the simple thing is we should not eat out of greed. Sri Aurobindo said it is the attachment to food, the greed and eagerness for it, making it an unduly important thing in life that is contrary to the spirit of yoga. So it's the preoccupation with food, its taste, and if it tastes good, trying to have too much of it, anticipating, eagerly waiting for food, especially something good to eat. That is what is contrary to the spirit of yoga, because yoga has much higher goals. Man is more than a feeding and breeding animal, and therefore man can easily shift to higher goals. And when that happens, then the attachment to these preoccupations starts falling off automatically. Because the fact is that in life, we do not have the time and energy for everything, not even for everything that may be worthwhile. And therefore, even among worthwhile things, we have to set priorities, leave aside things which are not really worth the trouble and the attachment that we have to them, including food. Now we turn to how to eat. which is what primarily today's session is about. And in Ayurveda, this has been called Kalabhasanam, that is the art of eating. We should eat with gratitude. Gratitude for what? Gratitude for getting food, of course, but gratitude also for the capacity to eat, the capacity to digest, and the capacity to utilize the food. Of course, we should be grateful for getting the food, because there are so many who do not even get enough food in the world. But that is not enough, because there are people who get food, to whom food is available, but they cannot eat it. They have an illness because of which they cannot eat at all, or they have been told not to eat certain foods. They may eat the food, but they can't digest it, they can't utilize it. Now, these things, the capacity to eat, digest, and utilize, are things that we take for granted. But their value we realize when we lose these abilities. And therefore, one has to be grateful even for these miracles of nature, because these are miracles in themselves. Eating something which looks so different from our body and from the energy that we use in our everyday work, that food entering our body and getting converted into the energy which enables us to do everything that we do, and into the type of tissues that our body is made of, which is so different looking from the food that we eat. All these are miracles of nature. And one has to be grateful even for having that capacity. And of course, we should sit and eat peacefully and eat consciously, which means that we should, as far as possible, not be thinking of many other things, doing other things while eating. The attention should be focused on the act of eating and eating with the right attitude. So one should start eating with a prayer, and some of the components of that prayer can be that we are grateful for the food, for the capacity to eat, for the capacity to digest, the capacity to utilize the food. And then we should eat for need, not for greed. And if we say that in our prayer every day, next time we have food available, even if it tastes good, we are likely to remember this prayer and not turn greedy. We should eat for health, not for taste, which means, again, if we have a choice available, then we will go for a food which is healthy rather than better in taste. And also, while eating, we should remember why we are eating at all. This applies to all aspects of physical culture in yoga, be it the physical practices, or be it sleep, or be it food. Because these are all things that help us keep our instruments, that is the body and the mind, in good shape. And unless the instrument is in good shape, we cannot live any type of life, not even spiritual life. And therefore, taking care of the body, keeping it in good shape, is a sacred duty. One can't say, well, I don't care if I fall ill, I don't care if I live 10 years less, but I'll enjoy food, I'll do whatever I'll eat whatever I like. But then we have come to this world with a purpose, and that purpose is to grow spiritually, to go beyond in our consciousness, to go beyond the way we arrive in this world. And therefore, for that, one of the basic requirements is that the instrument should be in good shape. So we should remind ourselves why we are eating at all, and pray that this food contribute to maintaining this instrument, the body and the mind, in good shape, so that I can do in the world what I'm here for. And one should finish eating with a prayer. To start anything that we do and to finish anything, to start anything that we do with a prayer and to finish also with a prayer, applies to all the work that we do. And that is important, because while doing the work, we may forget. But then if we keep doing it every time we start and finish, the main sort of attitude that the prayer is about is likely to be there throughout the work, throughout the eating. So that is how it helps. So one of the things that is important in how we eat is why one eats at all. That is, what are the reasoning, and the motives have been put together in these two very common expressions that the motives can be either living to eat or eating to live, which means either one can live to eat, that is, make eating or food the primary purpose of life. And when we make a living to do something to make a living and are not enjoying the work, to feel that, well, it is necessary for food, and food provides all the compensation and the justification for the work that we are doing, although we are not enjoying it. So that would be an attitude of living to eat. On the other hand, well, eating is a necessity. It is a necessity for staying alive and healthy, and that is why we eat. On the choice of food, Sri Aurobindo said that ideally it should be based on the real requirements of the body. What is it that will keep the body healthy? What the body really needs. But in practice, it seems to be based primarily on either vital desires or mental notions. Vital desires, that is, desires at the emotional level. I like this food, I don't like this food. So primarily taste. That is what is one of the criteria, one of the things that determines what we eat. And the other is mental notions, our ideas about what is healthy, what is not healthy, and so on. And to some extent, of course, the conditioning that these foods are supposed to be tasty and these foods are not supposed to be tasty. Now, even when it comes to knowledge about what is healthy for us and what is not, we have seen in the last few sessions how distorted those views can be. And therefore, one of the things one can do is to try and arrive as far as possible at what out of what is available in our environment in terms of so-called knowledge about what we should be eating, what is really authentic, what is really true, because misinformation in this field abounds. So sometimes our mental notions of what we should be eating and what we should be avoiding may itself be distorted. But then some of the mistakes that we make, be it due to ignorance, be it due to the misinformation that we have received from the environment, some of these mistakes can be overcome if our attitude to food is good. So that is the extent to which the attitude to food can matter. There's a little story about an experiment which was done on rabbits. These rabbits were divided into two groups. One was given the usual rabbit diet, grass, etc. The other group was given a high-fat, high cholesterol diet, which now everybody knows increases the risk for heart disease. Rabbit is a good model to study that, because within 4 weeks, the rabbit starts getting the type of changes in the arteries which happen in heart disease. So these rabbits, two groups of rabbits, were given these two different types of diets for a period of 4 weeks, and then they were examined for what type of changes had taken place in their arteries. As expected, the rabbits which got the usual rabbit diet, grass, carrots, etc., they did not get the changes which we see in heart disease, whereas those who got this unhealthy diet, high fat, high cholesterol diet, they also seemed to fall into two groups. Some got those changes and some did not. Now, how did it happen that in spite of an unhealthy diet, some rabbits escaped the adverse effects, escaped getting the disease? So they went into the details and they found that the technician who came to feed the rabbits was not very tall, and therefore what happened was that when she went to the cages on the top, she just opened the cage, threw the food in, and shut the cage. When she went to the cages which were lower down, she took the rabbit out, cuddled it, fondled it, and then kept it back in the cage and gave it some food. Now, it so happened that the rabbits which were at the lower level, the cages at the lower level, were the ones who escaped those changes which a person gets in heart disease. The rabbits in the top cages got those changes. So the rabbits which got a daily dose of love and affection could overcome the adverse effects of the unhealthy diet. So psychological factors can be that important. And therefore, we should try to keep improving our knowledge, but then be not obsessed with what we know and not worry too much about the mistakes that we might be making, because that again will become another type of an obsession and preoccupation with food. A preoccupation which we may be proud of because we feel that I am trying to learn as much as possible about what is healthy and trying to follow it. And once again, we may not be attached to the taste of food, but we'll be attached to our mental ideas of what is healthy food. And because of those ideas, we'll be all the time preoccupied with what we are eating and what we should not be eating. So the preoccupation is what one has to fight. Pay just that much attention as is within sort of the right proportion. So one has to be proportional in all these things. And if along with that we have the right attitude to food, we will be able to stay healthy on whatever we are eating. Some of the mistakes that we make might also not really matter much. So be careful and also be a little careless. So it is that studied attitude, studied casual attitude, which avoids preoccupation with food, avoids that longing for food, which is important. So while we should be eating what is based on the requirements of the body, we should not give too much importance, whether it is the vital desires, that is the craving for food that tastes good, or whether it's mental notions of what is healthy and what is unhealthy. Neither of these should be given the type of importance that they generally get. And Sri Aurobindo says that it is these two that get the maximum importance rather than truly sort of the requirements of the body. Also important are when one eats, that is eating at the right time. Eating a healthy meal at midnight will itself be unhealthy. Where one eats, eating in a proper atmosphere, eating in a restaurant late at night, where there's plenty of wine, women, and music around, will not be the same as eating in a place, in a spiritual place, or in a home which is full of love and peace. With whom one eats, what is the type of company one has, what is the type of vibrations people in the group who are eating together are sending one another. Are they improving the positivity of the others in the group, or are they draining the energy? So the company that one keeps, who prepared the food, the farmer who grew the food, what type of a consciousness he was in, was he happy, was he contented? The person who cooked the food, did that person have love for the people for whom the person was cooking the food? All these things, in one way or the other, in a subtle way, probably enter the food and have an impact. We can't control everything, but certainly we can control how we ourselves eat, the attitude which we eat, irrespective of the company we have, etc. Sri Aurobindo's one of the celebrated quotes of Sri Aurobindo is, "All life is yoga." Now, this can be easily misinterpreted. It does not mean all life, no matter how lived, is yoga. What it means is all life provides us an opportunity for the practice of yoga. So if all life is an opportunity for the practice of yoga, mealtime cannot be an exception, which means that we also can use this mealtime for the practice of yoga. And all what we have been talking about is, in a way, mealtime yoga. The mother says that at mealtime, before you eat, concentrate a few seconds in the aspiration that the food you will take brings to your body the substance necessary to serve as a solid basis for your effort towards the great discovery, and gives it the energy of persistence and perseverance in the effort. So this is an important component of the mealtime prayer. And what is it? Concentrate a few seconds in the aspiration that the food you will take brings to your body the substance necessary to serve as a solid basis. Because our body is the material base, the solid base, the framework which is necessary for all our actions. So this food should bring to the body that type of substance which is necessary and which is appropriate for serving as a solid base for our efforts towards the great discovery. What is that great discovery? The discovery of who we are. The discovery of who we are apart from the body and the mind. We all, in principle, accept that, yes, I'm not just the body and the mind, I also have a soul. But then that is only when we are asked who we are. But much of our life is organized in such a way as if we are just the body and the mind. We are not sufficiently aware of the soul to let it participate in our everyday life. So how will it happen? How will that soul become something around which our life can be organized? When we have not just known the existence of the soul as a mental idea, but when we have discovered it, when we have realized it, when we have started feeling its reality within. And one of the things that can contribute to that great discovery, the discovery of the soul, of our divine essence, which can participate in our everyday life, one of the things that can contribute to that great discovery is how we start eating, what type of prayer we say before we eat, and a similar prayer before we sleep or before we speak or before we do anything. The mother has talked about all these things at one place. These are some of the simplest pieces of advice she has given, but not very easy necessarily to practice. Simple advice can be really difficult to put into practice, and this is one of those. But at the same time, if we keep doing it repeatedly, making sure that repetition does not become mechanical and therefore insincere, it is sure to have an impact on our life. So we concentrate on the purpose of the food. The purpose of the food is to provide that material base for that great discovery, the discovery of the divine within. And the food should give us the energy for the persistence and perseverance which that effort needs, the effort for making that discovery. Because it's a long journey, it's an enjoyable journey, but all the same, it is a long journey which is not even necessarily completely linear. It has its ups and downs, and therefore it requires both persistence and perseverance. Persist, go on with it, persevere, don't give up, no matter what. So for that type of effort, we need energy, and the food should provide that energy. That is what we should be praying for. Similar advice coming from Sri Aurobindo: do not trouble your mind about food. Take it in the right quantity, neither too much nor too little, without greed or repulsion, as the means given you by the mother for the maintenance of the body, in the right spirit, offering it to the divine in you. Then it need not create tamas. Because the fact is that whatever we eat has a certain element of tamas. Why? Because tamas is the characteristic of matter, and what we are ingesting is basically matter. It had prana once upon a time, but it has given up that prana. I mean, if you really come to think of it, anything that we eat was once living, but then we eat it when it is no longer living, when the prana has left it. But then when we make this type of material, which is tamasic to some extent, all food is tamasic in that sense, enter the body, it should not create that tamas, should not create that laziness. And for that, what is important is, do not trouble your mind about food. Do not remain preoccupied with it. Take it in the right quantity, neither too much nor too little. Deliberately taking too little is also not right, because once again, it shows it can lead to an attachment with food. Taking too little, taking only food that which does not taste good, these are things which can develop a negative attachment, which means that we are avoiding too much food by taking too little. We are avoiding good taste by taking food which does not taste good. But then while making this type of choices, we are thinking about food all the same. So the preoccupation for the food does not go. Instead of a positive attachment to good taste and to a large quantity of food that tastes good, we are deliberately taking smaller quantities, deliberately avoiding good taste. So the preoccupation still remains. Instead of that positive attachment, we develop a negative attachment. And that can be as bad as positive attachment because every attachment is a chain and every chain is a bondage. And a chain is a chain, whether it's an iron chain or a golden chain. So even if it is a golden chain which makes us preoccupied with very little food, as little as possible, the minimum required for just staying alive, and food that does not taste good. Now, all this is to be avoided. So take it in the right quantity, neither too much nor too little, without greed or repulsion. So that repulsion that food is a necessity, so I have to take it, but otherwise I have no attachment to it. Well, that is a sort of a repulsion. Without greed or repulsion, as the means given you by the mother for the maintenance of the body. So the primary purpose is maintenance of the body. And this should be done in the right spirit, offering it to the divine in you. Because when we are offering it to ourselves, we are offering it to the divine, because that is what will help us digest and utilize the food. Those are divine functions. And then put it to a proper use if we are conscious of offering it to the divine. Which means that if it has been offered to the divine, then it will be used for the right purpose. The energy that it yields will be used for the right purpose. And then if it is taken with this attitude, it will not create tamas. It is much better to eat the meal in silence or at any rate in quietness. Once again, you find that there are no hard and fast rules that are given. The emphasis is more on the attitude. So some people, would make a rule out of it. I do not speak while eating. Now that would be eating the meal in silence, which is not bad, but it may not be always practical. And therefore, this liberal attitude, or at any rate in quietness. Being inwardly quiet is what is more important than being totally silent outwardly. One can be totally silent outwardly and still be quite disturbed within. And therefore, the important thing is the quietude, a state of being at peace with oneself, rather than an absolute silence, rather than not speaking a word while eating. It's much better to eat the meal in silence or at any rate in quietness. That is mealtime yoga. Something along the same lines has been said in the Gita. And this verse occurs in the 4th chapter, it's the 24th verse, and goes like this: Brahmarpanam Brahma Havi, Brahmagna Brahmana Ahutam, Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhi. Now, everything is the divine. Whether it is the food or the person who's eating, they are both manifestations of the divine. And therefore, the person who's eating is the divine. The food that he's taking is the divine. And the digestive fire to which it is being offered is the divine. And then comes this assurance, because the final goal of every human being is unification, becoming one with the divine, which means that realizing the divine to such an extent that life can be organized around it, the unification of the body and the mind with the divine within. What's sometimes summed up these days in that glib expression, union of the body, mind, and spirit. So when the person has been united with the spirit is the divine essence. And therefore, that is where the superficial parts of the person have also gone and merged with. So Brahman is that which is to be attained by samadhi in Brahman action. Brahmaiva tena gantavyam, Brahma karma samadhi. Which means that the one who can see Brahman acting in all his actions, that in all actions he can see Brahman, and is completely focused on that, because samadhi is, a concentrated thought, a thought in which person is so concentrated that the person does not let any other thoughts enter the mind. So the thought on which this person is concentrated is that he can see Brahman in all actions. And the person who is so concentrated on this single thought that there is Brahman in every action, he is in a state of samadhi. Samadhi, the sense that he is concentrated only on this one single thought. So when he can see only the Brahman in all actions and nothing else in those actions, is the one who will reach the Gantavya. Brahmaiva tena Gantavyam. The trains you might have heard is sometimes the announcement being made when the train is about to reach its final destination that अपने गंतव्य स्टेशन पे पहुंचने वाली है. So Gantavya is the final destination. So that is where the person will go who can see Brahman in all actions. So this mantra can be used as a food a prayer at mealtime, but it has wider implications because it is not only the food, although here Havi is ghee that has been mentioned because it is ghee that is offered also in a yajna, in a sacrifice to the fire. So it is digestive fire to which we offer the food, whether it's digestive fire to which we offer the food, or whether it is the fire of the Havan Kund to which ghee is offered. Both these are in a way symbolic of the fact that all our actions are an offering to the divine. The entire life is a type of a yajna. It's a type of a sacrifice being made. And sacrifice by whom? By the one who is himself a manifestation of the divine, offering all actions to the divine, offering all actions to be processed by the divine. And if the person can see the divine in all actions, then that person is sure to go to the divine. But then it's again a good prayer for meal times because it's talking of the fire which can be viewed as the digestive fire. It's talking of the ghee which can be seen as the offering of food. So it is the Brahman who is offering arpan. It is the Brahman which is being offered, it is havi, that is ghee or butter, and Brahmagno Brahman Ahutam, the ahuti which is being put in the fire, the ahuti as well as the fire itself is Brahman. Brahmaivatena Gantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. Sure is the person to go to Brahman, attain that final destination, who can see the Brahman in all actions. So this is the wisdom of eating, or Kalabhasanam in Ayurveda. Knowledge comes, but wisdom lingers. So to get knowledge about what to eat, how much to eat is relatively simple. But the wisdom that goes with eating comes slowly because that is the usual story in all spheres. Knowledge comes, but wisdom lingers. As Alfred Tennyson, the 19th century poet, said. The first book that I ever wrote was published in 1974, and the title was Eating Scientifically. This book was basically about knowledge of what to eat and how much to eat. 38 years later was published another book, Eating Wisely and Well. So I could see the limitations of just the knowledge of what to eat and how much to eat. And over these 38 years, had acquired a bit of wisdom, and therefore the title was changed from Eating Scientifically to Eating Wisely and Well. 38 years is too short a time to acquire much wisdom. So probably still there is a lot more that is required, but all the same, there is a shift in the title and the shift in the stance, the shift in the contents. And what we have talked today, some of it finds a place in the last chapter in this book, Eating Wisely and Well, apart from being sprinkled here and there throughout the book. Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch is the place where I work and where I'm speaking from. And after the COVID restrictions have been lifted, the ashram is open to everyone and you're all welcome here. And for any questions or comments which may go beyond what we are able to discuss in the session today, please feel free to drop us an email on yes@yesspirituality.com. Gratitude to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo for making the session possible. And thank you all for listening patiently. Stop share kar do. नहीं, questions पे invite करेंगे. Chat में देख लो questions. Let's see the chat. Yeah. मेरे को म्यूट कर दो. That's a very good question. Because a common experience, particularly in Indian families, that the lady of the house is a homemaker, and one of her major preoccupations is food. As soon as the breakfast is over, she starts thinking about what we'll have at lunch, and as soon as lunch is over, she starts thinking what we'll have for dinner. And that is the type of preoccupations that has to be avoided. One can put it in its proper place and streamline it in such a way that takes minimum time to and attention, and one has time in between available for better things to do. That certainly would be desirable. It will require also the cooperation of the others in the family, because the person herself can't do it all by herself, which means that the family has to be on the same page, and that is how these things become more smooth. But all the same, ladies do have a pretty sort of remarkable influence on the family as a whole. And therefore, if she is very clear that she will not occupy herself to that extent, it can be done. And some compromises might have also been made. Instead of cooking all the meals completely fresh, some of the things can be carried over to the next meal. So that way, refrigerators being available, the Yuga Dharma keeps changing. And in today's times, if it can reduce our preoccupation with food, if food can be carried over rather than cooking everything fresh at every meal, one can do it. Because we are changed in so many ways. We started using gas instead of the cooking food on coal or wood. Now we don't question that anymore. We got so accustomed to it. Microwave oven, yes, we still do. In the same way, food, whether it should be cooked fresh at every meal, the way it was cooked once upon a time on coal or firewood, whether that is really necessary, it can save us the preoccupation with food, why not? Because if it had to do any spectacular harm, food which has been carried over to the next meal, kept in the refrigerator, if it had to do any spectacular harm, the world would have known it by now. So more depends on the attitude to food, the attitude with which we eat, rather than the fact whether it has been absolutely fresh or it was cooked say 3 or 4 hours ago.
Good morning, sir. Hello. Am I audible? Hello. The voice is cracking, sir. Hello.
Seems there are no other questions.
No.
So,
Hello.
and we have time, so we'll play a
Hello.
music video and then the
Hello.
mother's music as usual. But before that,
Hello.
the classes for Yes.02 this week are over. But tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. Indian time, we have a Yes talk. And the talk is on creating democratic spaces in the learning environment. What it means is that, in the classroom, the traditional or conventional way of looking at a classroom has been that the teacher speaks and the students listen. And we forget that the students also need to be listened to. Not just heard, but listened to. And so the session tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. Indian time will be by an educationist whom you have so far known only as a singer. That is Mithu, whose videos we have been playing every day. So she's the one who is going to give this talk tomorrow on listening. And that is what creates a democratic atmosphere in the sense that not only the teacher, but the students also get their rights to be heard and listened to. And a learning environment is not just in the school, it is also at home. In fact, the child spends more time at home than at school. So it is just as relevant to others with young people around them as it is to teachers. So that is what she'll be talking about tomorrow at 5 p.m. Indian time. In the Yes.02 course next week on Monday, we'll have a discussion with two Ayurvedic physicians, Dr. Surinder Katoch and Dr. Mukta Katoch. It's a mother and daughter team. In fact, the entire family is in Ayurveda, very dedicated to Ayurveda. And we'll have a discussion with them on the 16th and once again on the 19th of next month. So 16th will be Monday. So the Monday session will be a discussion with these two Ayurvedic physicians, the mother and daughter team. With that,
So the question, please ask now. I mean, there's a question which has come up. The audio was.
Hello.
hello.
Yeah. So
Hello.
are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I don't have a question. So someone was trying to ask a question, but I think there was some audio issue from your end. So if you can please take up that question. Thank you so much.
Hello. Hello. It's not audible, sir. Hello.
Hello. Yes, you are audible.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes. May I know who is speaking?
Sir. Yeah, myself, S.K. Yadav, Professor S.K. Yadav from
Okay.
Indira Gandhi National Open University.
Okay. We can,
Hello.
we can
Sir,
see.
I was trying to speak, earlier also, but there was some audio cracking happening.
Anyway,
But
now you can speak. Now you are quite clearly audible.
So I am a person of agriculture, sir. I am teaching agriculture and I have studied agriculture throughout my life. So as you have very rightly and, scientifically spoken today about the how to eat wisely, that actually, instigated me to speak on this topic. Just I want to take maybe 30 seconds. So what I want to just submit, sir, that is that nowadays we have distorted in our understanding. If you compare the understanding which we prevailed during our childhood age, when our grandmother used to take care of everything. I mean, that specific day for specific food, the timing, the kind of, day for sowing of a crop even, and the specific varieties to be sown during a particular period of time. Like I can remember that we were offered only once in a week the urad dal. and that too not in the evening, but in the midday. So this is used to be advocated by our grandmother that you cannot digest the urad dal in the evening. Rather, you should eat in the midday so that you can, exert during the day and digest it. So likewise, there are many nuances, sir, and those have not been properly researched. What I also see during my this course of study and research, they have not been scientifically researched, but yes, they are existing in our old literatures like Vedas, Puranas, and Ayurveda even per se. But and those are need to be brought to the main domain of the lifestyle as you are doing, sir. So it's great, sir. Today lecture was a very great lecture, and I think it should continue, sir, with little more nitty gritty in the days to come. That will really help the society a lot. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Professor Yadav, for these comments and the appreciation. Some of it may not have been researched, but at least it's rational and one can understand it. For example, what you said that urad dal should be taken at lunch, not at dinner. This is something which we did talk about when we were talking about dietary fiber and things like that. That yes, less digestible food, particularly whole dals like urad dal or rajma, should be taken at lunch when the digestive fire is at its peak. The digestive capacity is at its peak during the pitta kal, that is 10 to 2 in the morning, and that is when we have our lunch. And in the evening, we can have more easily digestible dals like moong and masoor. So these are things which are plausible, rational, because at least we know that food which has a large amount of dietary fiber, foods which have the oligosaccharides which will lead to flatulence, those should be taken when our digestive capacity is better. And experience shows that digestive capacity is better at lunch. So that personal experience of people is as good an evidence as any piece of research. And that's why we have been trying to emphasize this knowledge, and this emphasis will continue in different ways. In some ways, it was done during the previous sessions on Ayurveda, previous sessions on dietary fiber, then another things to some extent today while talking about eating wisely. And these things will again come up, and you can ask more questions along these lines when this mother and daughter team, who are both Ayurvedic physicians, comes to us twice next week on the 16th and 19th.
Sir. Thank you, sir.
There is another question, which is too much use of microwave radiation to food harmful?
Yes, sir. As we discussed last time, that apparently not, because the West has had a very long experience by now with microwave cooking and pretty extensive use of microwave cooking, and nothing at least dramatic or spectacular has happened. So many of the apprehensions may be more, because we always have some sort of a fear or mistrust about new things. So it may be rooted more in that rather than any obvious harm. When it comes to more subtle things like whether you can, cooking in a great hurry in a microwave, whether it can incorporate the same amount of love which the mother has while cooking for her children, whether that can be done in a microwave, that can be questioned. But then again, bringing that consciousness into the food is more a function of sincerity than of the time spent on cooking. So one can probably do it, and that's why I said that we have to be also pragmatic. Each era has its own dharma, yoga dharma. So we don't have to be unduly worked up about it. If it is not practical to cook on coal and wood, we easily cook on gas. If it is even time for cooking on gas is not available, one can maybe do it in microwave. As somebody pointed out in the question session the other day, that idlis which take more than half an hour to cook on gas can be prepared in 3 to 4 minutes on microwave. So sometimes we have those compulsions these days, and with the same type of consciousness, if we cook in a microwave, it may be just as good.
So another question which we have is, what about to have a drink during the lunch time?
Muted. Drink during lunch?
Yeah. What about to have a drink during the lunch time?
By drink, probably you mean water, isn't it?
I guess alcohol.
Or alcohol. We did touch briefly on alcohol in the previous session. And on the whole, I brought out why it should be avoided, whether it is with meals or otherwise. Because while it may help some people overcome stress, there are better ways for overcoming stress available to us in yoga. That's what yoga is all about. Because alcohol will not really solve any problem. It only postpones it, makes us feel good temporarily. And therefore that should be avoided. And while some of the effects of alcohol may not happen to everybody. Everybody may not get drunk as a result of having alcohol. But if a person continues long enough, frequently enough, sooner or later, the liver is likely to get damaged.
So there is also one question that your books are not available on Amazon. Any particular shop where we can get them from in Delhi?
I'm not sure which books you are talking about. If it is books published by the ashram, yes, they are not readily available elsewhere. Books published by the National Book Trust, they are also a little more difficult to get because ordinary bookshops don't keep those. Books published by Rupa, like Eating Wisely and Well, they are very easily available on Amazon as well as in ordinary bookshops. If you tell an ordinary bookshop this is a Rupa publication, get it, the person will get it. When it comes to those which are not readily available, particularly those which are published by the ashram, you can send us an email and we can courier the book to you if you want a hard copy.
So also there is a follow-up question which says that, about having a drink during lunchtime. So the question is, what about water or soft drinks, having them during lunchtime?
Yes, about water, again, we have discussed that as a rule of the thumb, not more than 1 glass at a meal. And when to have that 1 glass, there's a rationale for having it before, during, as well as after the meal. The rationale for having it before is that you'll feel a little full, so less likely to overeat. The rationale for having it in the middle is that you can enjoy the food more. You'll enjoy the taste better. And the rationale for having it at the end is that it will clean the mouth, so it will do at least half the job which rinsing the mouth can do after eating the food. But then the total quantity should be roughly not more than 1 glass at a meal, because having more than that may dilute the digestive juices and therefore then the digestion may be affected. Drinks other than water, as a rule, anything that you dilute water with can have doubtful value. Water is itself the best drink.
So there's one more question, which is it harmful to mix mustard oil and ghee in the same dish?
No, there's no harm. Mustard and ghee can go together in the same dish or at the same meal, certainly, because there are certain things which can be cooked better in mustard oil and certain dishes which are better cooked in ghee. And the two can be had at the same meal.
And how about frying or making a tadka of both of them together? Is that also?
Yes, sure. Both these oils stand heating very well.
अनंत रूप धारिणीं चराचरे विहारिणीं स्मितैः सदात्म हारिणीं नमामि मात्रे देवतां नमामि मातृदेवतां नमामि मातृदेवतां नमामि मातृदेवतां सुमङ्गलां सुनिर्मलां महोज्ज्वलां महाबलां सुमङ्गलां सुनिर्मलां महोज्ज्वलां महाबलां तमोविनोदिनीं कलां नमामि मातृदेवताम् समस्तलोकशङ्करीं चिदम्बरात्म निर्झरीं दिवङ्करीं शिवङ्करीं नमामि मातृदेवतां नमामि मातृदेवताम् वराभय प्रदायिनी अभव्यभीति भायिनी प्रसादन प्रदायिनीं नमामि मातृदेवतां नमामि मातृदेवताम् प्रभात पद्म शायिनी सुधारस प्रपायिनीं प्रभात पद्म शायिनीं सुधारस प्रपायिनीं सुधारस प्रपायिनीं सौभाग्यसंविधायिनीं नमामि मातृदेवताम् हृदि स्थितां समश्रितां समर्चितां सुवन्दिताम् समर्पितात्मसेवितां नमामि